Everybody today is living in a bubble. Republicans and Democrats, we all listen to our own news sources that tend to reinforce our worldview. American youth between 18 years old and 34 years old all said that they were proud of the United States of America. So 85% said they were proud. The same poll taken 3 weeks ago, only 17% said they were proud. So we did something terrible to betray the young people in this country. The ironclad promise of the American dream was that if you worked hard, if you played by the rules, you could finance a home, you could raise a family, you could take a summer vacation, and you could put money aside for retirement. Democracy can't function where there are extreme wealth stratifications. People didn't hate us for our freedoms. They loved us for our freedoms.
Well, it's such an honor to be here, and first of all, congratulations on the announcement of your independent candidacy. So I want to start the questions right there. How do you plan to build a coalition of support as an independent candidate, especially in this polarized political landscape? How will you unite a divided nation?
Well, one of the reasons that we made the decision to run independent is because our polling numbers and the public polling as well show that the country is ready for that, and that my numbers are around 17 to 19%, and I've run against President Trump and President Biden. Can everybody hear back there? Okay. It's strange talking to people who are half a football field away from me. But anyway, I'm very happy to be here, and I'm grateful to you, all of you, for giving me the chance to talk. Right now I poll highest with independents, and then I've polled very high with Republicans, and I polled least high with Democrats. And a lot of the reason for that, but we're getting very big crowds. We're getting bigger crowds than any candidate except for President Trump. And we have 200,000 volunteers. It's probably 220,000 now. So the enthusiasm for the campaign is, I think, much larger by an order of magnitude than anybody else. We're raising money, and the crowds that we get, for example, yesterday I spoke in Washington, D.C. to a crowd of about 5,000 people, and we only gave notice of the location and the speech 24 hours in advance. We didn't get the park permit to that, and we're seeing that everywhere I go, and every speech. We give a day or 2 days notice, and we'll get 600, 700, 800, 900 people. So there's tremendous energy out there. And as I said, most of it for me is coming from Republicans and independents. The Democratic Party is very much closed down for me. And if you think about it, most Democrats, everybody today is living in a bubble. Republicans and Democrats, we all listen to our own news sources that tend to reinforce our worldview. And a typical Democrat will listen to CNN, MSNBC, and read the New York Times. And if that's all you're doing, you're going to have a very low opinion of me. You're going to think of me as a conspiracy theorist and a lot worse than that. Oh, if that's all I read, I would think I would have a very low opinion of myself. So one of the strategy, you asked about strategy, Natalie, one of the strategies that we need to implement over the next 13 months is for me to be able to talk to those audiences who have been blocked to me. And we've been using podcasts, we've been using alternative media. I don't think that I'm going to, there's so much hostility toward me in the traditional mainstream legacy media that I don't think I'm going to make a big breakthrough there. But what we find is that when Democrats hear me talk for even 5 or 6 or 10 minutes, that we have a very, very high conversion rate. And if we can get them to listen to a long form interview, the conversion rate is much, much higher. It's like 70 or 80%. All the values of the Democratic Party are values that I represent and that I fight for. If you went through a list of all the issues that were important to my father, to my uncle John Kennedy, to my uncle Ted Kennedy, I would check off the box on almost every one of them. But if you ask a Democrat, a typical kind of mainstream Democrat who's subsumed in the orthodoxies of the party, what I stand for, they're going to say that I'm indistinguishable from Donald Trump, because that's what they've been told by the media. So our challenge is breaking through to that crowd. My favorability ratings are better than any candidate and almost any public figure in the country right now. In fact, all the people that have been polled, including people like Elon Musk and Tucker Carlson, people who aren't politicians, my favorability ratings are the highest. So there's a lot of ground for me to exploit, and I also think that there's a wariness among the American public for the two choices that are being offered to them. I know a lot of Democrats, and I don't know anybody who comes to me and says, you shouldn't run because President Biden is a visionary president who is going to offer a new path to this country. People say, in virtually 100% of my conversations, people say you shouldn't vote, you shouldn't run because you might help Donald Trump get elected, and that is dangerous for our country. So it's an argument of fear. You should vote for President Biden, not because you like President Biden, because you don't like President Trump. And that, to me, and the other side does the same thing, more or less. So that, to me, is a sad comment on democracy, that we can't pick a whole lot of people who people get very, very excited about and who are offering things to our country. I'll close with this by saying this. I saw a poll 3 weeks ago that showed that in 2013, American youth between 18 years old and 34 years old all said that they were proud of the United States of America. So 85% said they were proud. The same poll taken 3 weeks ago, only 17% said they were proud. So we did something terrible, terrible to betray the young people in this country. And they're hopeless about so many things, about ever owning a home. The price of housing has gone from $215,000 2 years ago to $400,000 today. The interest rates have gone 3 to 7%. I have 7 children. One of my kids is 39 and he owns a home. The other 6 all have good jobs, but none of them expect to buy a home because it's so out of reach. They're worried about paying their student loans. You have a whole generation. The promise when I was a boy, the ironclad promise of the American dream was that if you worked hard, if you played by the rules, you could finance a home, you could raise a family, you could take a summer vacation, and you could put money aside for retirement with one job. Well, today, nobody in my kids' generation, not one person believes that promise applies to them. And I think that's a really sad thing for our country. And what I feel my job is to restore hope but also give them some faith in their futures.
My family came here for the American dream, and for so many, you're right, it feels so out of reach. And I know that you're committed to rebuilding the economic strength of this country, which really represents its prosperity. So tell us, what role in partnership would family offices, large foundations, and sovereign wealth funds play in your administration?
Yeah, well, I would, I really we should be talking the other way, where I hear from you about, what you, how you think that that wealth ought to be able to contribute to the general good. And I spent many years. I was a partner in the biggest green tech venture capital firm in the world, Vantage Point. We were the biggest investor and the first investor in Tesla. We built the biggest solar thermal plant in North America. One of my other companies built the biggest solar PVC plant. And so I've been to probably a lot of your offices looking for money to invest in the environment and in green technology. What I think all of us need to be thinking of is there's been this giant shift in wealth upward. And it's not bad to have wealthy people. That's a great thing, particularly if they're generous. But we need to start rebuilding the middle class in our country and to build middle classes in all these other nations around the world. If we're serious about democracy, democracy can't function where there are extreme wealth stratifications, where you have an oligarchy above and widespread poverty below. That configuration is too unstable to sustainably support democracy. So I think all of us have to figure out ways of how do we build small business? How do we build the middle class? How do we stop the shift in wealth northward? And this extreme stratification. During the COVID lockdown, we shifted in this country alone $4 trillion from the American middle class to the super rich. We created a billionaire a day. During 500 days, we created 500 new billionaires. And again, there's nothing wrong with that, but it's wrong if that money is coming at the expense of the middle class and the working poor. And I go around this country, and I have for many years, not just since my campaign, but I represent people who are injured by large corporations. I brought the Monsanto case. I'm representing right now 1,000 families in Columbiana County, Ohio, East Palestine, where the Norfolk Southern spill upended their lives. And so I spend a lot of time sitting at kitchen tables with people and seeing how they're living. And I see a level of desperation. I see a disintegration that I never believed would happen in this country. I see people making choices that they shouldn't have to make. Elderly people who are cutting up their prescription pills to make their prescriptions last for the week. I see people having to choose between gasoline and food and home heating oil. I talked recently to a young family, a mother and father living in a rental house that they can no longer afford, and hearing their baby crying in the night and having to wonder whether that baby was $50 sick or $100 sick or $1,500 sick before they bring them to a hospital. This kind of poverty is rather new for our country. Many of you who come from other countries, this is just the state of life. But our country was always the exemplary nation. Our country was the template for how do you build a middle class, which was the aspiration all over the globe. And we did that very successfully after World War II by creating a housing boom in this country. And when I was a boy, when my uncle was president, our country owned half the wealth on the face of the earth. We were the biggest exporter of goods in the world. But more than that, we were a moral authority. We were a real leader, and people all over the world wanted our leadership. They wanted our, they knew that they wanted our moral authority. They knew the difference between leadership and bullying. You know, I was talking as I walked up here today about a story that Natalie read in my book, American Values, about when I visited her natal country, Poland, with my mom and dad. I saw President Biden the other day when he came back from Hawaii. And he came back from Vietnam, and he was in Hawaii for the 9/11 memorial. And he said something that surprised me, which he said, they bombed the World Trade Center because they hated us for our freedoms. This is something that I never heard a Democrat say. That was something that President Bush said in 2001, and Democrats ridiculed him for him. But I went on TV the next day on Neil Cavuto, and I said, they didn't bomb the World Trade Center because they hate us for our freedoms. They bombed the World Trade Center because we put 2 military bases in Mecca, near Mecca, and that's what Saddam Hussein said he bombed it. Oh, people don't hate us for our freedoms in this country. When I went to Natalie's country the first time, I was 11 years old. And I went with my mom and dad, and we went up. The communist government of Poland did not want us in the country. My father went there at the invitation of a humanitarian group, and the communists made sure that we knew that they didn't want us there. They blacked out any mention of us in the press. We went to Krakow to visit the cardinal, who was a living saint. He had resisted the communists, he had been put in jail, he had been tortured, and his bravery, his dignity had inspired a religious resurgence in Poland. And for us, little Catholic kids, four of us, my 10 siblings, we went up into the cathedral. We spent 3 hours there and met with the cardinal, but when we went in, Krakow Square was completely empty. When we came out, there were 1 million people waiting for us. The word of our presence had spread by word of mouth, and the entire city had emptied out. People just coming to see us, to see my dad, my father. Our car was stuck in a sea of humanity, the embassy vehicle. My father pulled us up on the roof, and he gave a speech. And then the Poles started singing to us, "Sto lat." It's a song that means, may you live forever. And then they started singing an anthem that was illegal in Poland at the time. It was a criminal act to sing that song. They sang it again and again and again, and I was a little 11-year-old kid watching people with tears flowing down their face, people reaching up to touch us, people just joyful at seeing an American. And that same trip, I went to Greece, Italy, France, Germany, England, the same thing everywhere. People didn't hate us for our freedoms. They loved us for our freedoms. And they wanted to be like us. They wanted a middle class like we had. And we were the exemplary nation. We were the template for that. And now we've lost it in this country. And we need to rebuild it, and we need to do that through a collaboration of people who have control of great wealth and want to deploy it to serve humanity, to serve democracy, to serve the best angels of our spirits.
Well, a lot of people have hope that it's possible now through an alternative candidate like yourself. I wish we could talk more. Your book was phenomenal. I know you talked a lot about choosing between a democracy or a foreign empire, imperialism. We made maybe the wrong choice, but perhaps we can change that. Thank you so much, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., for being here. Thank you.
Thank you.
I wish we had more time.